Good evening, I'm Farhana Sheikh. Here are our top stories for tonight. Ukraine's Zelensky plans to step down after the war ends. And Spain and Italy sends Navy ships to protect flotilla. That and more coming up on AWANI International. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is ready to step down once the war with Russia ends. In an exclusive interview with Axios, Zelensky stresses his priority is to end the war, not to stay in power. He also vowed to ask Parliament to organize elections if a ceasefire is reached, despite security and constitutional challenges. Zelensky said Ukrainians may want a leader with a new mandate to secure long-term peace. Elected in a landslide in 2019, his five-year term would have expired in May 2024 if not for the war.
But they will work, I'm sure. They will work if you are active.
Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warns that the world is in the most destructive arms race in history and says global leaders must act now to stop Russia from expanding its war in Europe. Speaking at the UN General Assembly in New York, Zelensky says Russian President Vladimir Putin will keep driving the conflict wider and deeper unless allies present a united front and step up support.
He argued that weak international institutions, including the UN, have failed to prevent wars in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and elsewhere, and that international law alone can't guarantee survival. He also pressed for global rules on AI in warfare, pointing to the risks of autonomous drones and other emerging technologies. His remarks came as US President Donald Trump shifted his position, saying for the first time that Ukraine could win back all its territory. Speaking to reporters after, Zelensky said the US is willing to offer security guarantees once the war ends, but no specific details have been agreed on.
On to updates in Gaza, Spain will join Italy in sending warships to protect the global Sumut flotilla, which came under drone attack in international waters as it made its way to deliver aid to Gaza. Overnight, flotilla organizers reported what they called a dangerous escalation, with Israeli drones targeting the vessels. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says international law has to be respected and that the citizens on board have every right to sail the Mediterranean safely. The global Sumut flotilla is using about 50 civilian boats to try and break Israel's naval blockade of Gaza. Multiple boats were harassed during the attack. Flashbang devices were dropped and radio signals jammed, making communication difficult. In response, Italy has confirmed it is sending a second Navy ship in support of the International Aid Flotilla.
Necesitamos una Unión Europea más fuerte y por tanto más unida.
Now we have more after this break. Stay tuned and don't go anywhere.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Welcome back. China is pledging to cut its greenhouse gas emissions by at least 7 to 10% over the next decade, marking its strongest climate commitment yet. Speaking at a UN climate conference, President Xi Jinping said China will boost electric vehicle sales and expand solar and wind power, aiming for 6 times the 2020 levels.
China is currently the world's largest carbon polluter. He noted that some countries were against a green and low carbon transition in an apparent reference to US President Donald Trump. Xi's announcement comes a day after Trump called climate change the greatest con job ever at the UN General Assembly. Trump warned nations against renewable energy and vowed to keep promoting oil drilling. The US had skipped this year's climate summit, further isolating itself from the rest of the world. Close to 100 countries who attended the event announced their commitment to implementing new climate targets ahead of COP30 in Brazil this November.
China is urging the United States to remove what it calls unreasonable tariffs and create conditions to expand trade. Beijing has so far avoided buying U.S. soybeans this autumn, turning instead to Argentina, where temporary tax cuts have made prices more competitive.
Hopes for a turnaround faded after a recent call between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, which produced no new agricultural trade agreements. The shift has already cost American producers billions in lost sales halfway through their peak marketing season. According to traders, China has booked nearly all its October soybean purchases and around 15% of its November needs, all from South America.
The United States planned to extend the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, by 1 year, giving African countries continued preferential access to U.S. markets. Lesotho's trade minister confirmed the extension after meeting U.S. trade officials in Washington.
The pact, which covers 32 African nations, was set to expire next Tuesday if Congress did not act. AGOA has been vital for Africa's manufacturing sector, boosting exports of clothing, leather, and footwear by giving the continent a competitive edge over Asian rivals like Cambodia and Bangladesh. Lesotho has become Africa's largest garment exporter to the US, supplying major brands such as Levi's and Wrangler. Companies warn that any delay in renewal could cost jobs and force factory closures. The continent's trade has also been hit hard by tariffs imposed under President Donald Trump. Lesotho initially faced a 50% duty, the highest among its trading partners, before it was cut to 15% in August.
Canada aims to secure duty-free access for up to 95% of its exports to Indonesia over the next 8 to 12 months as both countries face rising US tariffs and global trade pressures. To support this, Indonesia and Canada have signed a new trade agreement to reduce barriers and simplify investment between the two nations.
On Wednesday, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement in Ottawa. This marks Canada's first ever bilateral trade deal with an ASEAN member. Canadian International Trade Minister Maninder Sidhu said the agreement opens strategies for Canadian businesses in agriculture, energy, telecommunications, defence and aerospace. He said the deal is expected to be ratified within a year, with trade between the two nations potentially doubling in 6 years. Canada is also working on a trade agreement with the Philippines, part of a broader push into Southeast Asia. Sidhu added that Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan are on the radar for future trade engagement.
US President Donald Trump is calling for an investigation into what he describes as triple sabotage during his time at the United Nations. He claims an escalator malfunction, teleprompter failure, and audio problems disrupted his appearance at the world body.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the escalator abruptly stopped as he and First Lady Melania Trump stepped on, nearly causing them to fall. He called for the arrest of whoever was responsible. He also alleged his teleprompter went dark at the start of his speech at the General Assembly, and that world leaders could not hear him due to sound issues. The UN has clarified that the escalator's built-in safety mechanism may have been triggered by Trump's videographer, and that the teleprompter was being operated by the White House. A UN official also said the sound system is designed to allow translation through earpieces. Trump, however, said he would be sending a letter to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and asked the UN to preserve security camera footage, saying the Secret Service is looking into the matter.
In other news, Thailand's new foreign minister says that both Thailand and Cambodia should scale back their military presence along their shared border and work together to ease tensions. Siasat Pongketkiao, who was sworn in just a day earlier, stressed the need to uphold the ceasefire that ended a deadly 5-day conflict in July.
Sihasa said his immediate priority is securing peace between the two neighbors, urging a withdrawal of troops and heavy weapons from border areas. Tensions over disputed areas erupted into armed conflict in July, leaving at least 48 people dead and thousands temporarily displaced. The fighting ended after Malaysia brokered ceasefire on July 28th. The border has remained mostly calm since, though simmering tensions persist.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been found guilty of criminal conspiracy in a case involving over millions of euros allegedly taken from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The Paris Criminal Court, however, cleared him of other charges, including passive corruption and illegal campaign financing. Prosecutors said Sarkozy used Gaddafi's funds to help finance his 2007 election campaign, promising in return to assist Gaddafi in improving his reputation with Western countries. Sarkozy served as France's president from 2007 to 2012. The 70-year-old has denied wrongdoing and called the case politically motivated. Brussels is weighing plans to use 170 billion euros of Russia's frozen assets to fund reparation loans for Ukraine, a move that could reshape Kyiv's finances but risk a major clash with Moscow. Head of Sputnik International, Dmitry Sams Jr., warns the plan could do more harm than good, pushing both sides further from the negotiating table.
If the Europeans go ahead with this, then that would be the equivalent of economic suicide, right? Because the majority of Russian frozen assets in Europe are stored in this organization called Euroclear, which is Europe's largest clearing and settlement organization, right? So there's about 170 billion, 200 billion dollars worth of Russian assets. Whereas Euroclear has $40 trillion worth of assets worldwide. Now, this is where things get interesting because Euroclear has offices all around the world. So if they were to freeze Russian assets and illegally confiscate them, then Russia could sue Euroclear in, let's say, Beijing and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain to recover these stolen assets and maybe get some additional damage. And if that were to happen, and there's a very good chance that Euroclear would, for example, lose a lawsuit in Hong Kong or lose a lawsuit in Beijing. In that case, the entire Euroclear system comes crumbling down because that'll give Russia an opportunity not just to recover its assets, but to seize Euroclear assets from all over the world, and that will be a massive reputational blow to Euroclear.
Dmitry also weighed in on why such action is being considered now.
They don't have the economic ability to keep up a full-blown hybrid proxy war against Russia, because despite 25,000 sanctions, Russian factories produce far more ammunition and drones than all of NATO combined. And when you look at the economic dynamic, Russian industry is getting stronger, while German and European industry is getting weaker. And Russia has far more financial room to do deficit spending, to increase government spending, borrowing, whereas Europeans have far higher debt.
He warned how the plan could derail ongoing peace efforts.
Russian officials have repeatedly said that they're operating under the assumption that the West will never return these quote-unquote frozen assets. So by confiscating them and giving them to the Ukrainians, that won't change Russia's political calculus because no matter what, Russia is committed to victory in Ukraine. It views this as an existential security issue. There's not going to be any compromise on that. What it will do is that it will give Russia even less incentive to make any sort of compromises or concessions to Ukraine and its Western puppet masters. Because theoretically, what the Ukrainians and their Western puppet masters could have done is come and say that, look, we want a big peace settlement, and as part of this larger peace settlement, were willing to return these frozen assets. And that could have been, a sweetener to any potential deal. But basically, if the Europeans do that, they'll get rid of the few leverage that they still have left. And they'll once again show Russia that these people don't play by the rules, that they're unreliable, and that they need to be knocked out.
That wraps up Awani International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the rivalry, strategies, and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more, head to international.astroawani.com and follow us on our social media accounts. I am Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching and good night.